So welcome to the third day of the New York Graph Theory Workshop. And we're delighted to have Megan Owen speaking on graph theory and phylogenetics.
So thank you so much to the organizers, and thank you all for coming, especially so early. So I'm going to talk about some problems at the intersection of graph theory and phylogenetics. And maybe some of them will be interesting to you, and there's kind of like open problems in these veins. Okay, so the first problems 1 and 2 are joint work with Katherine St. who's at Hunter College. And then problem 1 was with, we ran an REU in 2015, 2016, 2017. And problem 1 was with our 2015 cohort. And problem 2 is with our 2017 cohort. So just a quick introduction to phylogenetic trees. So you've actually probably seen them before. They're like an evolutionary tree, but we don't usually call them phylogenetic trees. But the idea is that you have, in this case, say fish, and you have now genetic information, DNA from them, and then you're trying to reconstruct their most likely evolutionary history. So which two fish species are most closely related, and then which next one, etc. Right? So this is like what we see, like if you go to the American Museum of Natural History, like you see the one of all the dinosaurs, right? And maybe sometimes they have the chicken off the end. Now, the problem is that not all evolutionary histories are tree-like. So in particular, especially with bacteria, they're a bit promiscuous with their DNA, and it doesn't just pass from parent to child. It can get like absorbed by different kinds of bacteria. And so we then want to use a phylogenetic network to describe evolutionary histories that aren't just trees. So where in a tree, you're only inheriting DNA or genetic information from your parents. And in a network, you can get it from not just your parents. So this is also networks, like, so when they talk about humans having some Neanderthal DNA, like that would be like a sort of a network edge in a tree, right? Or other hybrid species. So in general, you can represent a phylogenetic network as a directed acyclic graph. You don't want cycles because that would be kind of going back in time. And it's directed again is the time going down. Now this is an active area of like exactly what kind of a directed acyclic graph should be used to do algorithms to try and reconstruct these histories from DNA. Like that is a whole open area of research. So I'm going to talk about one specific kind of them. Oh yeah, so the other point is that in these networks, you can see the trees. So for example, here you have this tree, but you also have like that tree there. So there's this idea of like trees sitting in them. And so the idea is like maybe some genes would have the blue tree as their evolutionary history for just that gene. And then other genes would have had, say, the red sequence. And we need to talk about, there's 2 different kinds of vertices. You have tree vertices, which is what you would have in a regular tree. You have the one edge coming in, and then 2 or more edges going out. In this talk, usually biologists like to have stuff only. So when you have like a species, an event they like ideally to only have 2 species at once. Sometimes you do get more, and that's really just representing that we don't know the exact order of the speciation because it happened in such a compressed time frame. And then you also have what are called these reticulation vertices, where you have an in degree of 2 and then an out degree of 1. And so again, I'm going to look at just a particular class of these networks. There are all sorts of other classes with properties and being studied. Like this is a very, very active area of research. So I'm going to ask, when is a phylogenetic network just a tree with some extra edges? So when it's kind of an underlying base tree, and then there's just been some extra like, bits of transfer of DNA. And so the idea is that this was defined by Francis and Steele back in 2015, and they said a phylogenetic is tree-based. Okay, so if it could be formed by a tree just by adding edges between the tree edges. So for example, I can add in that edge, now making it into a network. I can add that edge, but I'm not allowed to add this edge because it's going from a tree edge, but to like one of my added in network edges. Now, of course, it's possible we could find a different tree such that all the edges, so that you can say, okay, there's this base tree and then these extra edges added, but with the black base tree, this would now not be allowed. Okay. So not every network is tree-based. These are two examples of ones that aren't. In this one, it's kind of easy to see, like you only have two leaves at the end, and so your tree can only kind of have two branches going up. But you can see like up here, you end up with like three vertices that kind of somehow need to be covered. And the other one on the far side is a bit harder to see, but it's sort of there to illustrate that this is like maybe not obvious what's tree based and what's not.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And the other one on the right, so this,
Yeah.
the top edge, you cannot put a vertex in the middle of that and join to anything else.
Well, what they're asking is, given this tree as it is there like a base tree such that all the other edges are going between edges of that base tree?
I see.
Yeah, so we're not adding, it's like you're given a network and you're like, okay, is it tree based?
Okay.
Yeah. At least right now. Okay. So in the original paper introducing these networks, they gave a polynomial time to algorithm based on 2SAT to check if it's tree based. And they sort of encoded, so if it's tree based, when you have a tree vertex, you have to have a path coming, you have to have your tree, so now the tree's in red coming through it. And so it can go either one of two ways. And that you can encode as like a conjunctive, one of the clauses in the 2SAT. And then a reticulation vertex, again, for the tree part, it can either come in on one edge and go out the bottom or come in on the other edge and go out the bottom. And again, you can encode that as a clause in your 2SAT problem, and 2SAT is solvable in polynomial time. So they give that algorithm. And then they asked some questions. So they asked, so if you are given a network, what tree is going to be based on? And that was, there was a series of papers looking at that. They ask, can you check in polynomial time if it's based on a specific tree? So given a network, given a tree, can you ask, is the network based on that tree? And that's the problem, the first problem we're going to look at. And we showed that no, it's not possible in polynomial time. And then is there a network based on all possible trees? And again, there are some results on that. Okay, so we're going to look at this problem of given a network and given a tree, is the network based on the tree? So at first glance, it sort of seems like you should be able to do it, right? You sort of say, whoops, one back here. You can sort of say, okay, like maybe I can kind of build up from the base of my network to follow my tree, right? Like I know I need all of these edges in my tree. So I'm trying to build up, the red is the tree I'm trying to build up. And then you can say, okay, well, I need A and C to join up. So the only way they can join up is to, I guess they could join here. And then I need B to join in. Oh, sorry, C has to go up to the top there. There's only the one path for it to go up to the top. And then B has to join in, but B has to join into the top, and I can do it. So that seems like, okay, it's like, seems like this might be plausible to get a polynomial time algorithm. And that's what we do with the students. Like we're both looking for algorithms and looking for counterexamples. And then you start to think about these kind of situations where you have some tree, and maybe it's pretty straightforward. So this is just like what's called the caterpillar tree. So you just have a spine and then the little legs coming off it, and then you have some ordering of the leaves. And then you have also a pretty straightforward network. So again, the top's just like a caterpillar, and it's got kind of these like, it looks kind of like there's the paths going down that are pretty, seem pretty straightforward, but then you have these crisscrosses, and the question is, if your network, the leaves are in a different order than your tree, is there actually a path that you can follow up to kind of like uncross it? And so once you start thinking about that, and thinking about, okay, can we somehow uncross things? This maybe makes you start to think of like NP hardness problems. Okay, so it's NP hard. It's a reduction from three-dimensional matching. So that problem, the three-dimensional matching problem, is you have three sets. And you have, sorry, three, I guess, I don't remember if they call them sets, but whatever. You have an X, a Y, and a Z, and then you have these sets that pick up one element from each. So like S1 or S2 picks up one element from each. And you want to pick a set of these SIs such that you cover each element in the X, Y, and Z exactly once. So that's the matching part, is to get it covered exactly once. Okay. So that's how we set it up. I'll just give like a bit of an overview. Is you have your tree and you have your network. And what you'll notice is they're both like, again, that the two caterpillars on the top. And if you kind of follow the paths down, you'll see for each, so this is like one of my X elements in my three-dimensional matching. And I've got an X1 and X1 prime. And very sneakily in my tree, I have them but switched. So, and then it doesn't show, but like here I would then have X2, X2 prime, and then over here I have X2 prime first and then X2. So what I have to do is switch each, to get my tree to fit into my network, I have to switch each of, I have to somehow, so this is a base tree, and then the idea is that these sets are going to like have some like weaving between these kind of like threads coming down. And I got to somehow switch all my pairs as I go up. And then there are the gadgets that are representing the sets. And you don't need to worry too much about the gadget. The important part is like either unselected, it doesn't do anything. And the like this, if this is your tree line going up in your network, it just like unselected just goes straight through it. And then selected, it switches one X pair, one Y pair, and one Z pair. And then there's also some counting because we have to make sure that we only select the K, because you've got to cover everything exactly once. So you got to have a counter and make sure you're not selecting too many of these. Okay, so then there's a whole rest of these are the proof that this works. So that was that problem. Probably going way too fast. Okay, well, I might be done quite early, which is fine. Then we'll be back on time. Okay. I guess I could ask if anyone has any questions. Okay.
So what's the three-dimensional matching problem? It's like
it's the one. So it's like you have
the two-dimensional matching problem is polynomial.
I assume so. I don't think it's probably some kind of matching. So it's just that you have the three sort of I don't think they're called, I don't know if they're called sets or something else in the problem. You have these three X, Y, and Z sets, and then you have these other sets that have one of each, one X, one Y, one Z, and you got to cover. You have a whole bunch of these SIs. You've got to pick the ones that cover everything, so you get an exact.
And the three-dimensional matching problem is NP.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But in your example, you have some overlap.
Yeah, well, that's it. So you get these, you have all these sets, right? You get more than like you're going to have a bunch of overlap. You're going to have a bunch of these SIs, and then you're picking only the ones that will cover it exactly. So like I couldn't pick S2 and S3, right?
But isn't there an existence problem as well? That how do you know that there's such a matching?
It's probably baked into the NP hardness is my guess. I don't know. Well, you can check it I mean, you can, if you're given a matching, you can check it very easily. But you're right, is if you have a set, is there one or not? I think that's part of I mean, that's the question, right? Is like you're trying to decide, does that set exist? So.
And one more thing.
Yeah.
That operation, right, where you put a vertex on one edge and a vertex on another and join it.
Yeah.
That's actually originally by Barnett and Grunbaum, and it's called like the bridging operation. And you're doing it with direction.
Oh, like you're thinking of like adding in, like you're thinking of like where you think of like adding in, where is it?
Right at the beginning.
Yeah. But where it's like showing like adding them in. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a vertex addition. I mean, you're putting vertex in a path. So
yes.
That's a bridging operation, but you have directions.
Yes. Yeah. From basically because it's all time. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, like a lot, like in the literature, this literature of these tree-based networks, everyone's always given it. No one's ever tries to build them up. I actually don't think there's any algorithms for trying to build these algorithms from DNA, like data, which is a good, like, I think people are just looking at them, because like I said, this whole area is pretty like active, and there's sort of some networks that have nice properties, and then there's others that are kind of more practical for building from DNA, but don't have the nice math properties, and like, It's very unclear. But I was just trying to think, it's a good question. It's like, I don't know if there's actually any algorithms that try to build these up from DNA. So I think all the work I've seen, you're just given given networks or trees and asked sort of these theoretical about properties of them. Yeah.
Those are asking questions.
Yeah.
What was the sort of scientific rationale? Having only in degree 2 or only in degree 1?
Yeah, so like just with a regular tree.
And
Yeah, so just with a regular, like a tree, you only have, like you have, yeah, biologically you have like essentially the one parent can have many kids and they don't, or like you have the one species coming down and it splits into two, and that's,
So, yeah,
yeah, so I guess that's the reticulation.
Degree 2.
I think again, it's a biological assumption that you just can't have somehow multiple, because it's like you're asking at that point in time, like it's not like you can't have some species that has DNA, like say some bacteria with DNA from multiple bacterial lineages, but it's just at like that one point in time, you're assuming it's only, it has like essentially a parent lineage and then it's getting some other DNA from only one other species at that point in time.
So if it was a third one, it might be later on, might as well just.
Exactly.
There's no reason to have 3 because you can just wait a little longer.
Yeah, because I think they made that as a simplifying assumption, is just to keep everything like or somewhat organized.
And the out degree only 2, that's simplifying it.
No, so the out degree could be more than 2. Yeah, you can definitely have trees that have more than two children. They show up like ideally biologists often want only 2 because they again assume at a point in time you only get 2 species at once. But again, because just sometimes you just can't tell and stuff's unresolved and you end up with like more children, and that's fine. Yeah. So then there were some more papers on it, and then there's another paper that sort of looked at this question of how much does a network deviate from being tree-based? So could you somehow use it to measure sort of how complicated these networks are in some ways? And so that paper by Francis Semple and Steele looked at one of the things they showed is they said, okay, how many leaves do you have to add if you're given this network? How many leaves do you have to add so that it's tree-based? And they showed that's polynomial time. And then they had some other measures. I feel like they proved a property or two about them, but one of the ones that they basically presented as an open question was, can the minimum number of network vertices, so if you have a tree cover in the network, basically what's the biggest tree that covers the most vertices? And can you find that in polynomial time? So what's the maximum covering tree or the minimum number of vertices that aren't covered by a tree? So that was another one we looked at. And again, you can get, this is one of the counterexamples like our students came up with. You can get really crazy stuff. Like that's a maximum covering subtree, and you can see like it's missing 4 of the vertices. And so you're sort of limited by like how many leaves you have. Like you can see you've got a problem here because you don't have that many leaves relative to how many nodes you have up in the network. And I won't talk about, but there's some papers that look at like kind of anti-chains and chains, like think of these as post-sets and looking at chains in them, and the biggest size says something about like whether it can be covered. So there's some interesting combinatorics here too. So the problem, this is just the problem, right, is that you have a network and you want to find the tree that covers the most vertices in it. Or if it doesn't, find how many vertices are left out, the minimum numbers. So at first we thought, okay, we thought maybe it was NP hard, because if you remember determining just if you have a network and you want to know is it tree based, that could be done by a version of 2SAT, which is polynomial. But max 2SAT, so if you have a 2SAT clause that can't be perfectly where you can't make all the clauses true, finding the max that can be made true is NP hard. So we thought, oh, this is the problem we have. And we tried reducing from it for quite a long time. And in fact, that's where we ended. We didn't solve this when we were actually working with the students, like in the time frame when we were working directly with them. But we had one student who was very, very persistent and kept coming back with sort of these ideas. And eventually we figured out that it's actually polynomial from a network flow. Okay, so if this is your network, what you're going to do is you take every vertex in it and you split them. So now basically every vertex in the original network has now become a very small edge, and like it's kind of shaded in purple, it's a bit hard to see in this flow network we're going to set up. We add a source and edges from the source to the top of all these purple edges. So we're going to do minimum cost max flow problem. So the max flow is going to get the tree, just generally try and cover the tree, and then the sort of counting of the vertices will be done with the minimum cost aspect. So the idea with the minimum cost max flow problem is on every edge you have both a flow amount that can be passed through, but also a cost to use that edge. And then you add a target at the bottom, and the edge is coming out of it. So again, it's like this is kind of respecting that you end up with a tree when you send the flow through, or almost a tree, and then you fix that at the end. And then capacity is just one. Just the capacity is everything's just one, because again, you just want in your tree you want. So we're going when the flow comes in, it's going to be kind of the piece of the tree, and then we'll have to attach them together to get the actual tree. So the flow itself will not be a tree, obviously, because it can't. Because everything just has a capacity of 1. So much flow. And then for the cost, we're just going to put -1 on all of our like edges that are the vertices. And so if you try and minimize that, you're going to be covering as many vertices as possible. And then every other edge has 0 because it doesn't matter if we use them or not. And so this problem is polynomial, it turns out. Whoops. Yeah. So for example, this would be an example of a flow through it. And you can see there's kind of like these sections here that aren't closed in, but then you can just fix them after to make a tree. So this is our network with the flow in purple, and then you can see you can just add in the gray edges just to fix it, to make an actual tree at the end.
So when you split the vertex, you can split it in different ways, but what you're thinking is just split it in a very specific
Yes, you're right. Yeah, because of that time component, it makes sense to basically just like you think of like, okay, you're entering. Yeah, you just always split it like this way. So the parent, essentially, you could think of the parent going up and the 2 kids like being at the bottom. Yeah, because it doesn't make sense because of that time component to split it any other way. To preserve like the tree property and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so the runtime is O n squared m. So that's where n is the number of vertices, m is the number of edges, but that's, I guess in a network, that's not restricted, but in a tree, the number of edges depends on the number of vertices, but not, I guess in a network, you could have all sorts of stuff. I will say this is an active area of research, so it's possible there's like some better algorithm out there for this, but I think we just really, I think people just were wondering as a polynomial, and for like, if anyone's going to run it, I think they're going to just use this. Okay, so that was that problem. So the open problem, if anyone's interested, is like I said, in that paper where they presented some different ways of measuring like how close to a tree-based network is a network. One of the other ones they gave is what's the minimum number of rooted trees with the same leaf set required to cover all the vertices. So again, it's like in this case where we had one where one tree doesn't cover it, could you put just one more tree in to somehow pick up all those extra vertices, or no? I think not, but I'm not 100% sure. I think not, because I think you get A, but then I think to try and pick up these ones, you have to go through B, but like somehow you got to cover all of these by something that's going to end up in B, and you're going to need multiple trees to do that. So that is an open problem. Anyone's like interested, like looking for problems and things this one sounds interesting.
Like find an algorithm?
Just how well, I mean, I guess that's the question. Is like what's the minimum number of trees to cover it? Because you can think of these trees as kind of being like base trees. So it would be like the idea, like biologically, there's a bit of an idea that like there's some, what's the minimum kind of these main trees you need? And then everything else is just extra.
I would say open question, like if you give it a tree, like you don't know how the number, there's some number of trees to cover it.
Yeah, it's open. So it's both open, like how many, like what's the minimum number? What's an algorithm to do it? Is it NP hard? Like that's all.
You say how many in terms of like in terms of the number of some structural thing that.
Yeah, well, so you just want to cover all the vertices. So like in this network, right, this is one tree, but there's these vertices that aren't covered, right?
Yeah.
And so if you add in another tree, that could be different. So maybe I add in a tree that comes down like this. And then goes to C and A, right? I can pick up those two, but I still have these two that need to be covered.
Right, so it's an algorithm question, but there's another, I guess it's an algorithm question, find an algorithm to find.
Yes, yeah. I mean, some of these are more, maybe not so much pure math graph theory as like graph theory and like a more, yeah, computer science discrete.
So you're given a network, and you want to find the number of trees in the network.
Yeah, the number of trees. So given a network, what's the minimum number of trees you need to cover every vertex?
Once.
Well, some might be covered more, yeah, at least once. Yeah, yes. Yes, I guess these are more, maybe more theoretical, yes.
Would it be like spanning trees? You're looking for spanning trees in the graph?
Well, they're these, so they're phylogenetic trees. So they come from the root and go down to the leaves. So they're not spanning.
Spanning would be one.
Yeah, I don't think they would be spanning trees because they're not covering, whoops. Sorry, I'm going like all over the place here. So they have the property, they start at the root and they have to go to the leaves, and they're a tree that fits that property. And it's like how many, so that's
the direction.
yeah, because sorry, you're covering them with phylogenetic trees, and that's
Yeah.
sort of the definition of the phylogenetic tree is like,
One direct.
yeah,
Trees.
Yeah.
Direct trees.
yeah,
Trees.
Yeah.
Covering that.
Yeah.
Or directed trees.
yeah.
Like, can you have cycles that,
No, because then you'd be going back in time.
okay.
I mean, you can have, like you can have these kind of cycles like acyclic. I mean, you can have like
You can have, yeah.
circles, but like not,
Right,
you can't go
right.
back, you're not allowed to go back in time.
So you're
Yeah.
looking for a DAG.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the application, what would be the reason for coming up with such a set of trees?
Well, so then the idea is you could be like, okay, these are like kind of the base. Be like, okay, there's, I don't know, 3 sort of mean evolutionary histories, and then these other edges are just sort of transfers that don't represent like a main path potentially. I think that was the idea overall. I mean, at this point, some of this is sometimes like just also what's like, I feel like math phylogenetics, it's like, it's motivated by biology, but sometimes people are just like, what's like, it does sometimes veer into just interesting questions that have, tenuous biological applications. I will point out actually though, that there was a structure theorem by Hayamizu, and it unifies a lot of the previous results. It doesn't unify this particular one, but even some of the other algorithmic results. It was like something about these anti-chains. I've not actually read the paper. Okay, and then how am I doing on time? Okay, lots of time. So the third problem is maybe a little more classic problem, a classic graph theory problem. So it's joint work. This came out of a meeting in Dagstuhl, and which is one of these. It's a computer science center in Germany, sort of like Oberwolfach, but more CS oriented. Okay, so again we have binary. So in this case, this is not a network problem. This is purely on trees. Our trees are rooted. They have a root. They have leaves at the bottom representing species, but in this case, just numbers. And they're binary, so that at every parent just has two, like every speciation event, there's just 2 children species coming out of it. The height is just the number of edges on the longest path from the root to the leaf. I think that's fairly standard definition. And then there's 2 types of trees you can look at that we're interested in. One is a caterpillar, which we talked about before. Again, there's like the backbone and then all the little legs coming off it. And then a balanced tree, right, is that at every like every partition, there's what am I saying? It just splits, yeah, it just splits right at every time. It's like always splits in two. Okay. And the caterpillars are the opposite of that, where there's not a lot of like branching. There's a lot of these leaves. Okay. And if for a balanced tree of height m, then there's 2m leaves. There's going to be kind of a lot of numbers, but I feel like I'm going to try and just, I think they can more or less be ignored. So don't feel like you have to get too hung up on
So
them.
these are kind of like the two extremes.
Yeah, exactly. And so a maximum agreement subtree is just that you have so you have two trees with the same leaves. And then you have a subtree restricted to Y would be, so if these are your two, if this is a subset of it, the subtree restricted to is you just build up the tree like from those two. So here it's just like a little just a pair, but here it's like you would build it up to like wherever they join together. So you're basically taking the subtree with only the leaves in Y. And then it's an agreement subtree if the two subtrees are isomorphic. So in this case, they are. You don't worry about like how long the branch ends are. You're just looking at purely how it branches. And then the maximum is you want two trees that agree so that have the same branching pattern with respect to the leaves, but that involve as many leaves as possible. So in this case, you can actually get one more, or you can bring in 7 and 8 and 7 and 8. And you can see in both of them, it splits. You get 1, 2 over here, and then comes down and splits to 7, 8. And again, like the lengths, like how many edges are involved in each branch, like it doesn't matter. You're purely looking at like how it's branching. And I should mention too, the order doesn't matter. Like if 2 and 1 were switched, that wouldn't matter. So the kind of the order you've got them down on the paper doesn't matter. It just matters that 1 and 2 come up to a common node here, and same over here. Like do they come up to a common ancestor? Yeah.
Yeah, so the labels definitely matter.
Yeah, the labels definitely matter, but you're allowed to switch. Like I could switch these two around and that doesn't matter. Just like, because you can think of it, like you think of picking this off the paper and it's like a hanging down like a mobile or something. Like that's kind of what, like biologically, that's the information you have, not like how you embed it in the paper doesn't matter.
But like, just as like trees, these are isomorphic. Like you could take the whole, if the labels.
Oh yeah, yes. Yeah, no. So you have the labels, yeah. Because those are species, and so you're looking at like kind of what's a common, like which species have a common evolutionary history in the two, and the maximum size of tree with this common evolutionary history. Yeah. Okay. So if you have two caterpillars, these are what are called anti-caterpillars. They're caterpillars, but you can see the numbers are ordered in reverse. And in there, if you have two anti-caterpillars, the biggest size of the agreement subtree is 2. And you can kind of see like here, like if I have 1, 2, I can't, anything else here I try to add in will be above where 1 and 2 meet up. But in this one, 1 and 2 are meeting up like at the top, there's nothing else I can add in. Or if I do like 3 and 6 and try and add like 1 and 2 into 3, over here they'd be adding above the 3. And so they have this property, and you can kind of like believe this with these examples. And even with the 4 and the 5 in the middle, like here they would have to join with 3 edge, but over here they would have to join with like the 6 edge to be added in. So there's a bunch of previous work on this problem. In particular, if you have more than 3 phylogenetic trees, 3 or more phylogenetic trees, and trying to find a maximum agreement, trees NP hard. There's polynomial time algorithms for computing it. And then there's like all sorts of other stuff I'm not even mentioning. Like you can think of phylogenetically interesting distributions on the trees and be like, okay, so basically move into probabilistic sort of graph theory and be like, okay, if you have 2 trees drawn from this distribution, what's the probability? What like would you expect for the minimum mass size? You can look at unrooted trees. There's like all sorts of variants. The one we looked at was there's this conjecture by Martin and Thaat that if they're balanced rooted phylogenetic trees with n leaves, then the mass is bigger than the square root of n. So that was a conjecture. And we show that's false by giving a family of counterexamples. Which actually then leaves some open problems of what is the upper bound or the lower bound in the okay. So to set up the counterexamples, I'll try and give an idea and then so if you have these trees, you can put caterpillars. So if you have, so we now are fixed with these balanced trees, and you can put your leaves now in any order. Like if you're trying to find a counterexample, the game is right. You want to put your leaves on these trees in such a way that it's hard to find a maximum agreement tree. And so one thing you can note is that you can kind of embed caterpillars in them. So that's like a caterpillar there, and I can embed another one in and cover like all the. So these are like disjoint caterpillars. So disjoint. I mean, they're allowed to share edges up here, but on the leaves, they're disjoint. So that one, but if I try to do it like, you run into problems. So if I move up, say, to the next size of balanced tree, I put a caterpillar and do another one, I end up in a situation where there's like leaves that aren't covered by caterpillars, but like I can't actually put another caterpillar in. And so if you count, so this is like the number, so this is n, and then your balance tree is on 2 n minus 1, and this is just a count of how many caterpillars you can add, and you sort of see that it ends up in these situations where you get a repeat, and then it'll kind of jump up. And this was in the sequences in the like the web page, the sequence web page. And it's given, it's up there. But sort of there's going to be a lot of like numbers and subscripts, and the details are in the paper. They all work out in the end, and they're like weird because they'll work out like to get it what we want. But that's like, but this is the point, is like you somehow get this gap with these trying to put in, but you do have this situation where you can, for certain ones, you can actually completely cover the balance tree with these disjoint caterpillars. Okay. And you can do it, you can get these disjoint caterpillars in it exactly when with these numbers. Okay. So in some for certain of the as you go through your balance trees, for certain ones, you can get exactly the right number of exactly cover it with disjoint caterpillars. So that's the examples we're going to look at, is where you can cover these with these disjoint caterpillars. Okay, that's our theorem, but let me go through. The idea is that you take your two trees, and again, like the numbers I'm not going to go through, but they're all work out. And you have these subtrees, and sort of by a pigeonhole principle, you can arrange your subtrees such that Si and Sj only have, like, in this case, 2k leaves in common. So you basically arrange them so that these have like minimal amounts of leaves in common. And that you can then cover them with these disjoint caterpillars, but in such a way that when I look at, like, if I take one subtree here, one subtree here, and look at the mass for them, you have these anti-caterpillars that only allow two a maximum agreement subtree of 2. So it's like not. So the idea again is like in this so you have trees, you have these subtrees at the bottom on each side, and you arrange everything. First of all, you divide the leaves in such a way that like the number of the leaves overlapping each of them is like not that big. And then of the overlap leaves, this one would have a caterpillar, this one would have an anti-caterpillar on those overlapped leaves. And so the maximum agreement subtree is at most 2. And so you then only have to worry about what's happening like up here. And so you end up with kind of that your maximum agreement subtree between the two of them is your 2 from here, and then like what's happening up at the top. And that's all like a case analysis with like some induction and recursion.
For the counterexample, you just see the mass less than that number, is that right? Yes.
Yeah, because you're trying to show, so when you plug in all the when you do all the Ks and plug stuff in, you show that in our counterexample, we have a massive size 32, but it's less than the square root of n. And the conjecture was that it should be more than equal to that square root of n or more.
It's getting equal harder, or is it just you write equal because it's easy to get the. Rather than, I guess.
Yeah, like what's a lower bound? We give a lower bound, but it's not that particularly good. I mean, I think it improved on whatever was there before, but there's like a pretty big gap between, I don't know if I have it. I might not, I don't think I wrote what it was. There was a lower bound that we give in the paper, but it's like, there's like a gap now between like what it is. And then there's like other, so that's still open. It's like just exactly what the lower bound should be. And then there's also in like a more general version, like if you don't restrict to binary trees, there's like gaps. So there's some recent work on it where they brought the bottom up to 0.04464 from like 0.3 something, 0.03, but there's a gap there. So there's like other variants of this problem that are also still open and maybe more of interest. Like there was, that one I think is actually improving a result of David Aldous. So there's like serious graph theory people like looking at this. Yeah, so that was it. Thank you very much.
Maybe I have an elementary question.
Yes.
So phylogenetic network is basically a directed acyclic graph.
Yes, but then people usually add stuff on. Like in this one, I talked about these tree-based ones, but people will add on. Instead, they'll be like, okay, you can only have one, not cycle, but one like kind of loop in it.
Mhm.
That's like a level 1 network, so one reticulation. So there's different ways that people try to reduce down because you can't just look at every directed acyclic graph.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then some of them are more useful for making algorithms and some have nice mathematical properties and some have like, I feel like right now it's very open in terms of like, it's not clear. I feel eventually like it'll settle on maybe a few main ones, but I mean, there's certainly some that are seeing more work, but there's like, it's sometimes wide open what exactly is the best way to do it, like one to use.
I loved your talk.
Thanks.
I've been wanting to jump into this area because Semple is doing it. I'm thinking must be something about matroid theorists that make this
Yeah.
interesting to matroid theorists. So
Yeah, because he
I've
has
been
like,
wanting- yes,
yeah, but he like, it's interesting because I feel like I know, he does a lot in it, and I don't know how much, there are some connections. I have seen matroids related, not related exactly to this, but related to other.
maybe I'll try to jump in this summer.
Yeah, but we can talk like after too. I can like,
Mm.
yeah.
Questions.
Did you have a question?
The question is interesting on their own, but I was curious since it is connected to the phylogenetic stuff. And people in the sciences can actually use this stuff.
I mean, it's being used, like, I mean, if you're a scientist and you think that the organisms you're studying have a network as their evolutionary history, there are algorithms out there for reconstructing these like network evolutionary histories.
They'll use that. It's kind of interesting. So
That-
actually run these
Well, I mean, they're not that, a lot of the ones are in these level K networks, so they'll only introduce like one. But I mean, it's all connected. There's like, I would say right now it's like there's kind of the practical ones that are being used to like try and actually for constructing networks from DNA. And then there's the ones with the nice math properties. And there's like, there are definitely algorithms sort of like some theorems trying to look at them are one subset of the other and stuff, but there's kind of, I think that's what's not clear right now is how is this all going to get
overlap it.
bridged together. Yeah. And like the ones that seem appealing for biologists, can you prove them actually math properties about them? Because a lot of them are just kind of, like heuristic. I mean, obviously based on something, but there's a lot of like heuristics in them. So yeah.
Questions. Should we thank the speaker? Yeah. I really hope it got recorded.
Well,